Hi, everybody. Welcome back to GreenTalks. I'm very pleased to have you back with us right now. We're starting a little bit late because of the keynote on the other side.
Hey, everybody.
But
welcome back to GreenTalks. I'm very pleased to have you back with us right now.
That was YouTube echoing. So thank you very much for coming back. And we're going to dive right into it right now. I am very, very happy to do this introduction. I introduced him in phase 1 and I spoke about how much I admired him. And since then, I've only gotten to know him better, and that admiration has only increased. I find him to be brilliant, exceptionally knowledgeable, and even though he doesn't believe me, I do think he is quite funny when he wants to be. So please join me in welcoming Paul Manley.
All right. Well, thank you, Allison. I'm going to be joined today. Anne Lavender is running the screen behind me, and Simon Nocini Messier, did I say that correctly, Simon, is joining me to co-present on this. And Simon is a member of the foreign policy table and is going to be taking on foreign policy with the shadow cabinet. So the purpose of this workshop is to look at a policy review and renewal process for the Green Party. There we go. So we have a process that kind of began last year where we started to develop knowledge clusters and tables around certain issues. And so we have a foreign policy table that's been working since January. And they have been looking at sections of the Green Book that relate to foreign policy. And we've been talking about what we need to do in terms of next steps for a member-driven process to review other sections of the Green Book and renew our policies and have a process of archiving policies that are no longer relevant. Simon.
Oui, bonjour Paul. Alors, nous allons, bonsoir. Je peux pas activer ma caméra, donc je vais pouvoir tout de même présenter la partie en français. Donc, on vient de me donner la possibilité d'activer ma caméra. Alors, OK, bonsoir. Oui, donc on va présenter la table de politique étrangère. On va proposer, comme Paul le mentionnait en anglais, un processus dirigé par les membres pour réviser les autres sections du livre vert et on va convenir des prochaines étapes.
All right, so we'll get you to pop to the next slide. And this is me and Simon are going to be presenting, and we're going to present for about 45 minutes, and then we're going to just open it up for questions and answers and have a chat about what this might look like. And moving on. So what is the foreign policy table and who are the members? They're volunteers with varied backgrounds in international affairs. They've been working since January and they have scanned through the international affairs policies in the Green Book. Simon and I are going to be switching back and forth so that those of you that can read French when I'm speaking English can read French, and when we flip sides, Simon's going to take over, and those of you who can read English can read English. And next, and
alors,
here we go. This is your slide, Simon.
Oui. Donc, le contexte, modèle de gouvernance du Parti vert du Canada, le problème ou le besoin. Alors, modèle de gouvernance du Parti vert, rôle des politiques. Les membres rédigent et approuvent les politiques. Le cabinet fantôme développe une plateforme et des positions publiques. De quoi avons-nous besoin? Un processus permettant d'élaborer des politiques d'une manière coordonnée, globale et inclusive, et un processus permettant de mettre et maintenir à jour nos politiques.
And I would just for those of you that don't know, I've run in 4 elections for the Green Party, and part of the problem that I've faced as a candidate is that our policy book disappears, and it disappears for some good reasons, because we have policies that are out of date. We have policies going back to 1988. So for example, in 1988, there was a policy to make cannabis, to decriminalize it. Well, cannabis is now legal. And so we don't need to decriminalize it anymore. And we don't need to reduce punishments for simple possession because it is a legal substance at this time. So not having a policy book available meant that it was difficult for volunteers, for campaign workers, and for voters to figure out, what our policies were. And so we'll just take you to the next slide here, Anne. S'il vous plaît. So we're proposing a comprehensive policy and renewal process to bring our policies up to date, ensure a well-rounded and robust set of policies, and establish our posture as a government in waiting. In doing so, we seek to avoid ad hoc policy decisions and the internal turmoil that creates. So as an MP, I'm looking towards the Green Party policy book for what it has to say, what the members are telling us we should be doing as members of Parliament. And if we have gaps, if we have outdated policies, then that's not helpful. Take us to the next slide, Anne. Thanks. Over to you, Simon.
Oui, alors, le statut actuel de la politique du Parti vert et les documents publics et non publics. Livre de politique, le livre vert, 80 pages, pas facile à trouver pour les membres et non disponible pour le public. Donc, nous avons besoin d'une mise à jour, d'une révision et même d'archivage. Il existe également des lacunes. Alors, une version consolidée du livre de politique générale destiné au public avec une vue d'ensemble de nos politiques pour les membres, les sympathisants et les électeurs. Donc, la vision verte, c'est un livre de 149 pages. C'est une plongée en profondeur dans les politiques du Parti vert sous forme de narration.
And I'll just say about Vision Green, that's what actually got me to run for the party. Like, you can take it to the next page. Thanks, Anne. That's what got me to run for this party. Elizabeth May asked me multiple times to run. I think the 5th time I said yes, but it was really Vision Green that sold me on the policies. When I read that, I went, wow, this is a party that covers the full breadth and scope of issues in a way that is really meaningful to me. So as we look towards developing policy, this is the renewal process, we want to always make sure that we're going back to these 6 key principles: ecological wisdom, social justice, participatory democracy, nonviolence, sustainability, and respect for diversity. Over to you, Simon.
Alors, ça, c'est le processus que la table des politiques étrangères là, a suivi. Donc, en octobre-novembre, une soumission des propositions. Février, juin, donc édition, traduction. Mai, juin, les amendements. Juin, juillet, engagement des membres. Juillet, août, vote de priorisation. En août, résultat, ça c'est août 2019. Novembre 2021, AGA virtuel, la première. En mars 2022, donc celle qu'on vit là, présentement ce week-end, l'Assemblée générale virtuelle, la deuxième, et en avril encore, le vote des membres après l'Assemblée générale. Si je peux ajouter, Paul, moi, c'est aussi les 6 principes des Verts mondiaux qui m'ont emmené vers le Parti vert.
Yeah, it's been a long process this time around, and we're hoping to have a quicker turnaround. I think we're looking at this fall again for another policy convention. And so after this conference is over, we're hoping that the process gets opened up again, and we can continue to work on policy, because it's really our last policy convention was 2018. So next slide, Anne. So the elements of the process are to review to do research, to go through the steps, and the steps include formulating a high-level policy, linking specific policies that we have, and update or archive the specific policies, and then to consolidate a policy book. And I'll get Anne to drop in into the chat the NDP, but after you switch slides, the NDP policy book, because you'll see it's like 30 pages long. Yeah, let's just follow through on the slides, and we'll do it. We'll add it to the chat later. And let's just stick with this. We'll use it as an example later on. We'll throw it in the chat. So next slide, please. And I'll just say, just to finish my thought about the NDP book, is it consolidates the policies, it shortens the language of them, and so it's 30 pages long, and that's the public-facing document. We would never get rid of our green book of policies and have that, it's always going to be there and available for the members. And Vision Green is something that we want to continue with, because that is the narrative about our policies. It links the research, and the background to our policies, and creates a narrative around that. So over to you, Simon.
Oui, donc dans le processus, il y a toujours une revue, donc examiner le livre vert, identifier ce qui est valide et à jour, ce qui doit être revu, réévalué par les membres, identifier les lacunes, les manques.
Okay. Next, Dan. So there's a parallel research process, and this is to produce research documents and position papers, review the literature guided by GPC principles, speak with experts, look at actually what other Green Party positions are around the world, and then produce a position paper, and that would be linked to Vision Green, so that people that really want to take a deep dive into policy and do the research and see, where do these policies come from? Why is it that the Green Party is moving in this direction or thinking this way? Le prochain.
Alors, formuler une politique de haut niveau. Donc, signifie des politiques universelles qui peuvent s'appliquer à des situations se déroulant dans différentes parties du monde.
And we're here talking about specifically different parts of the world, foreign policies. So next slide, please, Anne. So we're going to look at a specific case study, and this is a proposal about a process, not policy proposals, just so we're very clear about that. We have policies that apply to specific situations and conflicts, and right now I'm going to just look at the policies on Israel and Palestine. We have a policy G08 P42, so that was in 2008, policy number 42, 2008 policy number 30, 2010 policy number 9, 2014 policy 22, 2014 policy 58. And then we had a special general meeting and created policy 13, which actually incorporates much of these other policies, these 6 other policies. When you look at S16 P013, it has language in it that says we confirm the policies, so it says it confirms its policy of condemning illegal settlements constructed in the occupied territories. So the Green Party of Canada confirms this policy, and then it reiterates the policy. So in many ways, we have 6 different policies all wrapped up into one. Next slide. And over to you, Simon.
Alors, la mise à jour ou archivage. Mettre à jour les politiques pour s'assurer qu'elles reflètent la réalité actuelle. Vérifier le choix des mots afin de nous assurer qu'il répond à une politique des Nations Unies des droits des peuples autochtones et des LGBTQ+, et féministes. Archiver les politiques qui ne sont plus pertinentes.
Okay. So then the next part of this policy process would be to consolidate policies into a shorter version, and which would include both the high-level universal policies and specific policies for specific situations. And we're going to look at an example of what this could look like. Again, we're just talking about process rather than actual policies. So I'm not proposing any changes to policies at all right now, but just looking at a process. So as I was mentioning, we have an existing specific policy which contains elements that could be applied universally to other situations. And is the Israel and Palestine policy S16 P013 measures to pressure the government of Israel to preserve the two-state solution, the addendum to current Middle East policy, is a policy that could apply in other situations. And we're going to have a look now at what that might look like. Oh, and Simone, do you have the?
Oui, la prochaine.
No, this is the one actually where we're going to do it both in English and French.
Okay.
And so if you pop back, I'll read this one and then we'll do the next one in French. So a high-level universal policy on occupations and illegal settlements could look like this. The GPC supports the right of all people to self-determination and stands opposed to all illegal occupations and annexations. The GPC condemns tactics used to make occupations permanent, such as the construction of illegal settlements in disputed territories and the displacement of people living in those territories. The GPC calls for the removal of all existing illegal settlements in occupied territories. The GPC opposes Canada's entry into trade agreements, investment treaties, or military and surveillance cooperation efforts with occupying countries. The GPC will advocate for Canada to take strong diplomatic action and to utilize economic pressure tactics to encourage occupying countries to enter negotiations and seek peace. The GPC supports the use of bans on the importation of products produced wholly or partly within occupied territories, divestment from companies benefiting from occupation, and the cessation of military aid as valid means to encourage occupying countries to seek peace. So next slide, and we'll let Simon do this one in French.
Alors, ce à quoi pourrait ressembler une politique universelle sur l'occupation et les colonies illégales. Au niveau occupation et implantation illégale, le Parti vert du Canada soutient le droit de tous les peuples à l'autodétermination et s'oppose à toutes les occupations et annexions illégales. Le Parti vert du Canada condamne les tactiques utilisées afin de rendre les occupations permanentes, telles que la construction de colonies illégales dans les territoires contestés, ainsi que le déplacement des populations vivant sur ces territoires. Le Parti vert du Canada demande l'élimination de toutes les colonies illégales existantes sur les territoires occupés. Le Parti vert du Canada s'oppose à ce que le Canada participe à des accords commerciaux, des traités d'investissement ou des efforts de coopération militaire et de surveillance avec les pays occupants. Le Parti vert du Canada préconisera que le Canada mette en place de fortes mesures diplomatiques et utilise des moyens de pression économique afin d'inciter les pays occupants à entamer des négociations et à rechercher la paix. Le Parti vert du Canada appuie l'utilisation de sanctions telles que l'interdiction d'importation de produits fabriqués en tout ou en partie sur des territoires occupés, le désinvestissement des entreprises qui profitent de l'occupation et l'arrêt de toute aide militaire comme des moyens valables d'encourager les pays occupants à rechercher la paix.
Merci. So if you read the Green Party policy on Israel and Palestine, that would have been language that we just pulled out of there. We don't have policies on other places in other areas where people might consider it an occupation. For example, Tibet or Xinjiang or South Sudan or Yemen or other areas. And then also this is a policy on nonviolent resistance and what it could look like. And there's other areas where you want where minorities are being repressed and where you don't want them to take up arms necessarily, but you want to support nonviolent action. And so this would be a high-level nonviolent resistance policy, potentially. I'm not proposing a policy here, just a process, and this is kind of what it might look like. So a high-level nonviolent resistance policy could state something like, the GPC is committed to nonviolence. The GPC supports the use of nonviolent tactics such as government sanctions, consumer boycotts, institutional divestment, economic sanctions, and arms embargoes as legitimate responses to violence and oppression. The GPC opposes efforts to delegitimize or condemn such nonviolent approaches. And again, those of you who have it in French, I'm going to had a chance to read along, and now it's over to you, Simon, and people can read along in English.
Donc, on arrive à la partie là, archivage, donc les politiques redondantes déjà intégrées dans une politique plus récente. Alors, ces politiques sont maintenant incorporées dans S16 P013, mesure visant à faire pression sur le gouvernement d'Israël pour préserver la solution à deux États, addendum à la politique actuelle sur le Moyen-Orient. Et là, on a la liste des différentes politiques qui sont toutes englobées là, dans une seule, incorporées dans une seule politique.
And just a quick note on that. For example, G14P22, condemning illegal Israeli settlements. That policy, all of these policies are in S16P013, and that policy is in P013, just reads that the Green Party of Canada reconfirms its policy of condemning illegal settlements constructed in the occupied Palestinian territories, and calls for it basically reads as G14P22, but we could archive G14P22 and just take out the reconfirms its policy line in S16P013 as an example of a potential way of consolidating policy and making our policies streamlined. So next slide, Anne, please. So this one we're doing it. Again, this is the consolidated policy book, and this would be the public-facing document. And I won't reread this again because this is exactly what we read earlier on occupation and illegal settlements, and again en français. So the consolidated policy book, the public-facing document, if we had policies on occupations in a number of other places on the planet, which there are, and it would be up to the members to decide whether we want to have policies in those areas, they could read something like this. So this is like a high-level version of the Israel and Palestine consolidated version. The GPC supports a peaceful process to create a two-state solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict based on pre-1967 borders and respecting the intent of UN Resolution 194. And then GPC policies on occupation and illegal settlements and nonviolent resistance also apply in this specific case. So if there was a policy on South Sudan, if there was a policy on Yemen, on the Ukraine that related to an occupation, we would also just say that this policy, the policies on occupation and illegal settlements and nonviolent resistance also apply to this specific situation, this specific case. Non, en français, Simon.
Alors, les documents, livres de politique consolidés, documents à l'intention du public, donc consolidation, qui est la proposition, Israël et Palestine, donc le Parti vert du Canada soutient un processus pacifique visant à créer une solution à deux États au conflit israélo-palestinien basé sur les frontières d'avant 1967 et respectant l'intention de la résolution 194 des Nations unies. Les politiques du Parti vert du Canada sur l'occupation et les colonies illégales, ainsi que la résistance non violente, s'appliquent également dans ce cas précis. Toujours comme un exemple ici. Hein?
And here is the proposed continuous policy process again. So we would be doing research and reviewing things with the policy table, and as members are always in that process of putting forward policies, but we want to have a process where we're reviewing and reassessing policies. and then formulating high-level policies and link specific policies to them, and then update or archive policies that have become out of date. And we have a lot of policies. When you read them, there just needs to be some reworking of the language. In some cases, the language isn't appropriate anymore. In some cases, it does things like reference the Warsaw Pact, which no longer exists. So we need to make sure that the language is updated, and then have a consolidated policy book that is available and easily searchable for the public. We want the voters to know what we stand for, and we want to have a quick and easy reference for them to be able to find out what our policies are. And that would be, all member reviewed and approved as part of a general meeting. Oh, you get to do it in French.
Ouais. Alors, le processus continue de revue, révision proposée. Donc, on démarre avec une revue, une recherche avec la table de politique étrangère. Donc, examiner le livre vert, identifier ce qui est valide et à jour, ce qui doit être revu, réévalué par les membres, identifier les lacunes, le manque. On fait des recherches, analyse de littérature, toujours guidé par les principes du Parti vert. Puis des verts mondiaux. Donc, s'entretenir avec des experts, rédiger un document de synthèse. Donc, première étape. Deuxième étape, formuler une politique de haut niveau et établir un lien avec des politiques spécifiques, comme on a vu un peu plus tôt. Donc, des politiques universelles qui peuvent s'appliquer à des situations se déroulant dans différentes parties du monde, des politiques qui s'appliquent à des situations et des conflits spécifiques également. Ensuite, on arrive à l'étape 3, donc mise à jour ou archivage de certaines politiques, mettre à jour les politiques pour s'assurer qu'elles reflètent les réalités actuelles, vérifier le choix des mots afin de nous assurer qu'ils répondent à une optique dont on mentionnait du droit des peuples autochtones reconnus par les Nations Unies, le LGBTQ+, et féministes également. Et comme je mentionnais, l'archivage de politiques qui sont plus pertinentes. On arrive à l'étape 4, créer un document destiné au public, consolider les politiques en une vision courte qui comprendra à la fois des politiques universelles de haut niveau et des politiques spécifiques pour des situations particulières. Et ensuite, approbation par les membres lors de l'Assemblée générale par l'entremise du processus dont on a discuté. Voilà.
And of course, this whole process is member driven. So we have knowledge clusters that we're inviting people to join, and members can always be looking and reviewing our policies and making suggestions for amendments and changes. And other Green parties have processes in place. The Green Party of Ontario has a process where they're continuing to look at all of their policies and making sure that they keep them up to date, that they're reviewing them, renewing them, and archiving them if necessary. As I mentioned, we still have a policy on the books to decriminalize cannabis, and there's no need for that policy to be on their books anymore. And there's a lot of policy language that needs to be looked at and brought up to date with the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, looking at it through that lens, LGBTQ plus lens, feminist lens, and diversity, inclusion, and equity lens. So we want to be really mindful about the whole process, but of course it's all member driven. And we're going to drop this into the chat. This is our call to action for people who want to be involved in joining knowledge clusters. There's an expression of interest to apply, and specifically, like if you have an area of interest, you don't need to have a degree or a PhD, to join a knowledge cluster. It may be something that you've studied and been working at, or just you have real world experience in a certain area, And this is what the application form looks like. And we encourage people to apply and to get involved at this level. And then, of course, we're going to be opening this up to the membership in a broader way as we look through this review and renewal process. And I'll let you explain that en français, Simon.
Oui, alors c'est un appel à l'action afin de regrouper une grappe de connaissances et une expression d'intérêt. Donc, on recherche des gens qui ont un intérêt pour des domaines particuliers, donc les politiques étrangères ici, là, dans notre cas, et qui ont des connaissances là, qui peuvent être intéressantes et partagées. Ce n'est pas nécessaire là, d'avoir fait des études doctorales, donc toute personne qui a un intérêt et qui est un joueur d'équipe, hein, qui veut faire partie d'une table de travail et échanger, partager et arriver à créer là, des politiques qu'on va pouvoir présenter aux membres, mais en premier, là, même prendre des membres par l'entremise des idées des membres et créer les politiques du Parti vert, les actualiser. Et donc, comme Paul le mentionnait, hein, c'est toujours à partir de ce que les membres nous amènent.
So now we're just going to open it up for questions, and people who want to hop right in, we could just, there's not a lot of people in attendance. So we will, Sarah, go ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. I've been at this for a long time. I've been a member since 2006, and my dearest love has always been policy and the member-driven policy. So I just have a few red flags around what you're proposing here. And just to try to get clarity, I'm not saying I don't like the idea, but for example, you know, I worked hard on all of those policies that are in the Green Book. I read them all every other year, and we voted on them, and we had the members forum in the online discussion of the Green Party website. And slowly but surely, the members forum turned into what is today called a graveyard. And so we haven't had an online site for member discussion. And I know that we've got We Decide now, and that's coming in and that's formalizing. So that's great. I love that. But we did have the Committee for Motion Development that got approved to go ahead in 2016. It was a small group. It had great ideas. And then we had the 2018 process that only allowed members to make 5 motions, or 15, sorry. And this move to force members to only do kind of generic and not specific is, in my mind, pulling the rug out from under the green vision that you don't need a PhD to be a specialist. So I'm a specialist in nuclear power and what it's really doing to our country. I don't have a PhD in it, but I'm getting very well known in no nuclear circles. Dr. Gordon Edwards knows me. Dr. Susan O'Donnell knows me. Angela Bischoff knows me. I'm very active and I campaign on that. But the vetting process around who's an expert and who gets to turn our policy book into something else, it has red flags for me. And so last year, there was an attempt to take the policy book and rewrite it. And I was one of the detractors of that action because, so for example, when it was rewritten, the motion on genetic modification was misrepresented. And we worked hard on that motion. You know, we said no to genetic modification. I think it was back in 2016, 2018. And the rewrite said that we would allow genetic modification for research purposes, which was totally not in the one that we worked so hard on. So I guess what I'm getting at is I don't understand why we need to do this, because we have our policy book. I agree there is stuff that is totally outdated, right? So if it was just properly indexed, if it maybe was reshuffled so that it matched existing shadow cabinet roles instead of these kind of weird, it's got some weird table of contents. I've read it many times and I love it. I think it's sacrosanct. But so for example, the policy to recognize Israel or Palestine as a nation state, that's very specific, right? And so to water that down into something generic hurts me. It hurts me as a member. I worked hard on that motion. I talked to other members for years, and I still think that it's an important specific way. I feel empowered as a member that that's in the policy book, and it would hurt me to have it watered down. I feel like it's a very easy, important, workable stepping stone for our politicians to say, you know, this is how we get that job done. We recognize their nation state status at the United Nations. And in 2015, when it came up at 2017, I forget, when it came up at the United Nations, Stephen Harper put it down. And I know that Elizabeth tried to say something about that, but I felt like, okay, that's my motion. They're talking about it. Where is it, right? So I guess I'm just a little concerned that we have 7.3.13 in our Constitution that says that politicians create position statements and they create the platform, but it must not contradict member motions. And so our politicians, they take the policy book, and we just passed making one-page policy briefs. And so that's your job. You just take the policy book and you take what the leader in the shadow cabinet team says is most important. And hopefully you have, I like the idea of working groups. Unfortunately, that's the knowledge clusters is the language used by our last leader. So I don't think it's appropriate to use that term. And I think that it's really important that any member can join them. We must not be vetted out based on whether we have PhD beside our name or not. Yeah, so that really is a huge red flag for me. Okay, I'm gonna finish it up. That's it.
Okay, so just a number of things, Sarah. Thank you so much for that. The consolidated book that came out last year was never supposed to be made a public document. So it was unfinished. It was a process that I had asked to try to create something that got rid of all the therefore be it resolved statements and created something that was easy to find and updated. And so it was the beginning of a process, and it got posted before the last conference when it shouldn't have been. And so this is looking at a more like it, because it needed member engagement and member involvement. And so that you're right, like the members' policies are sacrosanct, and I don't want to eliminate them in any way, shape, or form. What I want to do is see a policy book that we can, for one thing, like, can you find the policy book right now? Because if you were writing policy for this party and you were searching around looking for the policy book, you wouldn't find it. And as a candidate in 4 elections, I had trouble finding that policy book. And I think that, we have people that with the best intentions going, there are policies in there that are embarrassing to the party, and we get hung up on them because they need to be reviewed and updated. And so this is like looking at a process where we can actually do this in a very systematic way, right? I also said I don't think you need a PhD or a MBA or a BA in anything to be involved in these policy tables. I was the shadow cabinet critic for, and let's call them policy tables rather than knowledge clusters. I get that as well. But I was a shadow cabinet critic for international trade and investment. I don't have a degree in that at all, but I have done films about it. So I've done research, and I know who to talk to, and I've learned how to parse that language. And so I have connections, with people like Gus Van Harten at Ryerson University, who is an expert in this area, and I can ask him questions about new agreements as they come up.
Can I just say one idea while we're here? and this is it, is I've had the idea for a while that you could, so our politicians, our leader in our shadow cabinet, as per bylaw 6, could take the policy book and highlight it. Red is kind of defunct. Yellow is we're not using it to make position statements and platform in this election cycle, and highlight the green ones that this is something that we are going to be using to create those one-pagers, to create our position statements, and to create our policy. I
would rather make sure that the red ones are in an archive section of the policy book. You know, cannabis, it's legal now. We don't need to talk about decriminalization anymore, right? So that's the process I'm talking about, is renewing our policies and reviewing and renewing and making sure that the language, because if you look at some of the language that was written in 1988 from a feminist perspective or LGBTQ plus perspective or an UNDRIP perspective, it is out-of-date language. I'm going to let Simon weigh in.
I just wanted to add that I said the same thing than Paul in French. I don't think anybody needs a PhD to join the table, and whoever has like interest, knowledge, like, or interest and want to be part of the team, it's like it's open to everyone, and I think it's very important to keep it that way also. Yes. So c'est tout ce que je voulais ajouter.
David, I'm added you. You're allowed to speak, and so yeah, I popped you into the webinar actually as a panelist. I'm just going to pop people with questions in, so you can turn on your camera and ask a question or weigh in.
Great, thank you so much, Paul. I wonder if each of you could maybe just touch on specifically how this new proposed approach will make the, and maybe just summarize, how it'll make the policy development process a little less bureaucratic, because I'm finding taking part in this AGM, which is my first AGM because it's virtual and I've had the opportunity to do it, I just find it very frustrating. I think there's just an awful lot of wrangling and procedural gobbledygook that isn't good for the party. So how can we continue to uphold this notion of representative democracy, which is a fundamental principle, but streamline it? And how will what you're proposing help us to accomplish that?
So there is a committee of shadow cabinet that's responsible for the policy development process, and they are reviewing how this whole process. And I think that there's been a lot of learning in doing this in a virtual environment. It's a challenge doing it in a virtual environment because we're not able to have side conversations as easily. We can do things through Rocket Chat, but I think that it's a learning process, and I think that there's going to be some takeaways from this process. I haven't been involved in that side of things, so I can't really answer how we got to where we are with that.
Okay, I just hope that as this goes forward, that'll be something people consider, because someone who's seeing this through fresh eyes, I feel discouraged that we're not getting our act together as a party, and that perhaps last year's experiences are still influencing what's happening. And I was looking for some more hope than I'm actually experiencing, because I just find there's an awful lot of wrangling and very little accomplishment, especially when I watch the other track where they are developing policy today. That's just my input.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. The one thing I would say about what we were doing here as Greens is that it's far different from other parties. And I was involved in the NDP for years, and would go to policy conventions, and they had a prioritization of policies, and then they had a way of just making sure that you didn't get past 15 policies, and then the rest went to the executive. And so we didn't discuss a lot of policies that came that were proposed, and they never got discussed or voted on the floor, and then they just disappeared. And so I think we have a much more open process here, but we do need to clean up the way that we're doing it. And I'm going to be up next after this workshop. I'm co-facilitating in the plenary, so I'll get a firsthand that whole process. But
that's great. And I recognize it's a balance, and I recognize that what makes us Greens is that we believe in participatory democracy. But I just don't have a great taste in my mouth as to how the plenary sessions have been going, particularly on Friday, where we spent 2 hours deciding which way of voting would be appropriate. It was just very frustrating to me. So that's my input, but I do understand that we also have to preserve representative democracy.
Yeah. All right, thanks for that. Are there any other questions? Comments, suggestions? And there is a discussion on Rocket Chat, but I haven't been looking at it. So yeah, not a lot of discussion. Anything else? Well, if that's a wrap, we can wrap it. Michelle's got her hand up. I'll pop you in. I'm going to promote you as a panelist, Michelle, so that you can turn your camera on.
Hi, thanks. I'll just leave my camera off if that's okay.
No problem.
I just wanted to explore this idea of expertise a little bit more. I think because I have a PhD, I'm kind of labeled as wanting that for the shadow cabinet, and it's been frustrating because that's kind of the opposite of how I feel. But I do think that there has to be a line drawn somewhere. So for example, if people, I'm trying to think of an example that won't be super controversial, but.
You mean in the application process?
I guess just in policy development and how much expertise people have to weigh in. I mean, I think we have lots of built-in measures where the grassroots have the last word. But I'm just trying to figure out how to strike a balance between expertise and just people with interest, because I mean, we lose a lot of votes for some of the beliefs of our members as well. So I just want to strike that balance between kind of tin hat and PhD. And I think in the last iteration, too much emphasis was put on credentials, PhDs, and that has caused some of the problem.
Yeah.
But I do think we need to, find a good place where you have to have some lived expertise. Like you can't just be interested and do your research on Google. Like there needs to be, so I'm not sure what the answer is, but I'm just a little bit concerned that there's kind of an open invitation for people to join knowledge clusters, and some people want to be in every knowledge cluster. So I think,
That was something, Michelle, that we saw with the applications, is that people checked every box and said that they wanted to be on a policy panel for every area, and that's great. You have a wide spectrum of interest, but really we need people that are focused in an area, like Sarah had mentioned, nuclear energy, and so having a focus is just helpful. So I saw a hand go up here, and Sarah's got her hand up again, but thanks, Michelle. Go ahead, Sarah. Oh, Andy LeMay. I'm going to just pop Andy in as a panelist here.
So I just wanted, Paul, can you walk us through what happens after we apply? Like, is there a vetting process, or can truly any member who wants to be in a knowledge cluster be in a knowledge cluster? And then what are the knowledge clusters? When do they meet? What's going on there?
So I think we agreed with, maybe we won't call them knowledge clusters, but policy panels maybe. And so the process is that people apply. We're going to be giving, we have a spreadsheet, and it's each shadow cabinet position is going to be looking to put together a policy table. and working with members. And so then it's the shadow cabinet that's going to be reaching out to people and saying, you know, do you want to join in for a meeting to discuss policy, to review these areas? And yeah, what we want is people that are serious about really digging in and doing research and being helpful, right, in this process. And that's what we're looking for. So if people have already been, like you were saying, you've been working on the nuclear energy thing, and so if you can you know, let that be known when you're putting in the form, then that's perfect, right? That's what, and we don't have positions for every shadow cabinet position right now as well. So those are other things that we're working on filling. And shadow cabinet is of course appointed by the leader. And so we have an interim leader right now, and with the last leader, shadow cabinet was, the decks were cleared, and we want to have I think we want to have a setup that the new leader coming in doesn't feel like they need to clear the decks, because that's just not you know, it's not a way of building the party and building our knowledge base and building a team, right? So hopefully we're working towards setting up the next leader for success, you know, with people that are focused in policy areas, are working on this review process of seeing what, you know, rather than, because if you left it to the MPs, I could tell you that we are way too busy. When I was an MP, I was way too busy for this. Honestly, just to give you some idea, most people have no idea what MPs go through. I had 9 critic portfolios, and at one time I had 5 bills in front of me that I was responsible for reading and providing advice to my colleagues on what we should talk about, how it fit with Green Party policy, how we should vote, all of those things, and what amendments we should put forward on them. And I had as much staff as the average MP does, a backbench Liberal, but you know, they just a constituency staff, and the amount of work just dealing with your constituents is a lot of work. And so you can't expect the MPs to be doing this. The MPs need our support more than anything else. That's why we need shadow cabinet connected with caucus much more to help with those pieces of legislation that get tabled. We need that knowledge base that shadow cabinet can call on to help. You know, so the more we build the branches, the bigger the tree we have, and the more people are included, and the more seeds are going to hit the ground, and the more we're going to grow. So there you go. Allison, it was Andy, I think you had a question. Did I pop you in as a panelist? Let me see. Oh, maybe Allison, you can go ahead.
Sorry, I disconnected.
You disconnected? I got disconnected. I just got kicked out.
I think because I'm host. That's why once I get disconnected, everybody gets disconnected.
Oh no. Did we lose everybody?
Nope, everybody is still here, I think.
Okay, good.
Yes,
so you had a question, Allison?
Yes, I did. So you touched on it a little bit already when you were talking about how we have a new leader coming, and when we had the last leader, the slate was completely cleared. And I had been kind of wondering about that, because we are going through the process, this application process, and shadow cabinet is going to be consulted about the not knowledge clusters. So it's kind of like if shadow cabinet is, well, if there's a new leader and the new leader chooses a new shadow cabinet, and then the not knowledge cluster is going to stay. And then also we had been talking about brain trust as well. So I was just kind of wondering how this fits into the timeline if we're looking at everything right now.
These are really good questions. I mean, I think what we want to do with the leadership process is to ask all of the leadership candidates to accept the shadow cabinet that is there. If they want to shuffle a few people around and put in some new folks and do some minor shuffling, that would be one thing, but not to undo everything that's been done. because that's not a constructive process or way forward. And I think that's, shadow cabinet serves at the pleasure of the leader, but maybe we need to have that in the rules, that we're working on election preparedness, and that we don't, just throw out the baby with the bathwater with a new leader, and that we continue to work on election preparedness. I think that it's super important that we do that. What was the other aspect? Oh yeah, the brain trust is just something else we were talking about. People that shadow cabinet or people at policy tables are connected to that may not be Green Party members, but they're people that we can call upon for information, for analysis, for research. And as an MP, well, as a shadow cabinet critic for international trade, I was talking to people like Scott Sinclair from Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. I was talking to Gus Van Harden, who's an expert in investor state dispute settlements. And I think that's what we're looking at for a brain trust, is to be able to tap into people that we know are experts in certain areas, but may not be Green Party members and may not necessarily be Green Party supporters, but just people that have a particular level of knowledge and expertise and actually want to see change in a certain area. Now, Andy.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
Okay. I'm getting back to the PhDs and that. I think in policy development, my experience is the wider the breadth of people that you have developing this policy, the better it is and the stronger policy that you're going to get at the end. As an example, is I would hate like hell to have a PhD change the tire on my car, because then I wouldn't feel as safe as if it was a technician. But in the same breath, is I'd like a lot of policies a lot better than what a technician could provide. I think the issue that comes at hand, and this is I found in many areas, is language, is the communications. The PhDs have a certain way of writing things, then regulators have a different way. But yet, if this is to apply to people on the ground, then you better start talking their language. So some of the stuff I got involved in the past was take what this PhD is saying and put it into boots on the ground words so that people can understand this, or even to change it. It's the language that's critical. Like, and we're talking about policy development, but what we're really talking about is policy knowledge for the people that we want to vote for us. So we need all that. Once the policy is passed, we need that all vetted through communication so that we have the correct language at the right levels to attract the people that we want to attract.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you, Andy. There's two things I would say about that. And as an MP, we ran everything that we wrote through a software called Hemingway, which took things down to
going to go to workshop, so that can be addressed there in a more fulsome discussion. Yes.
Who do I have to mute here? So when I was an MP, we took what we wrote through a software called Hemingway, which took everything to like a grade 7, grade 8 level of language, because you want to make sure that people can understand what you're saying. In the diversibility community, the disability community, there's a saying, nothing about us without us. So don't be making policies about us and telling us, what's good for us without consulting us. And so the idea of having people with lived experience helping you with policy is super valuable, right? Because if you're always flying at 50,000 feet and trying to write policy and think about, what's going on down in the ground, if you're not consulting with what's going on down in the ground, you're not going to get it. You're not going to get it right. I don't know if you have anything you want to weigh in on here, Simon.
No, I agree with you, and I think we need to work together as a group, as all members of a party will, and it's to work together and find solution. And some people has some little things to bring, and that little piece is important, and somebody will bring a bigger piece, and that one is very important too. But without the little one, sometimes you don't achieve the same amount of work. So everybody needs to bring what they can bring to the table, and as a group, we built the the best policies we can, respect the members, and work together. I think that's the important things there is like allow everybody who has something to to bring to the table. So allow that person to bring it, and feel part of the group and go forward.
I'm going to ask Anne, actually, if you would drop into the chat the link to the foreign policy table, just because there's the bios in there for people. And I've been sitting in on that process just to see, how it works. And there's a lot of people that have worked, in different aspects of foreign policy that are bringing together perspectives that, I just would have no idea about, quite honestly. Like, as a filmmaker, I'm a generalist. That's my training, is to do research and to talk to people and to try to, put together something from what you hear, like diverse opinions and diverse ideas, and to try to put that together under a certain set of values and principles to seek solutions, right? That's always what I did as a filmmaker, and that's what I did as a politician. Is you need to be talking to diverse voices and getting different opinions, and seeing which of those fit under the principles and values that guide you. And, we have those 6 principles that guide us, and as a party, and our policies need to fit under that. And so, I just found that process, there's some people at the policy table, the foreign policy table, that have a lot of expertise on things like international development and defense, like yourself. Yeah. How have you been finding that, Paul, that process, Simon?
I'm learning, every day. I'm bringing my part of experience, like you. Before I was in the NDP, so I studied politics. So sometimes I see people arrive in politics, and it's part of the game. We see them, they run, and you're like, okay, I saw that in one of my first course at university, and now they're gonna learn it there, in the parliament, but that's part of democracy, and so sharing the knowledge, it's part of the society we're living in, and so we need to recreate that, also, I think, in the Green Party, and work together all the time. That's to not divide, but to unify and to go in the same direction, respecting those 6 principles you're talking. I think we always have to go back to them. It's like, okay, that's the scope we're using to make sure that we're going in the right direction, and all that in respect, and make sure that we're doing the right thing. And I think all that with pleasure also. I think that's important in that adventures of life, to have pleasure in all those things that we're creating, and helping others to live in a better place, and develop a nice society that's very strong, democratic, open, creative, innovative, respecting the planet. Is like there's a lot of work to do, and I think everybody has something to bring. Yeah.
I'm a lifelong learner myself. So you have to approach life with an open mind. And I also find that you have to approach people where they're at. If you've seen that spectrum of activism where, you're over on this side and there's your direct opposites there. And then there's people at different levels that you can't bring people all the way over, you bring them by nudges, and you go to find where they're at. Yeah. and find common ground, and then work on getting them to understand, what your process is, what your ideas are, and that process as we go through policy development and review, I think is super important. We want the members involved all the way along. I see Allison has her hand up, and then there's somebody else I'm going to promote. Go ahead, Allison.
Take up someone's space if there's someone who hasn't spoken yet who wants to ask a question.
Well, I'm just promoting. Who was that? Somebody just, Carrie Rutherford was.
Oh.
I promoted somebody else.
If someone wants to speak,
just go ahead, Allison. Yeah, ask away.
I love the image. I do like it better than knowledge clusters, I must admit. I love the image of a policy table because I always say everybody brings something different to the table. And I like the idea that some people bring their life experiences, people bring like whatever their interests, their lifelong interests have been. Some people bring the academic side. So everybody brings a different perspective. I love that idea. My question is once again very logistical. Cabinet is always shuffling, and we've been trying to match cabinet. Shadow cabinet has been trying to match cabinet. So would the tables also shuffle along with cabinet when it shuffles?
I don't think so. I think just because the minister that you've been shadowing has changed portfolios doesn't mean you should change portfolios. I think that you have an area of expertise, and that's why you're in the position that you're in with culture and heritage, Allison. And so I think that that's important to stick to. And I think it's also important to think about Green Party policies and values when we're talking about cabinet positions, because we have a policy in our book that we set up a Department of Peace and Security, right? So we should have a shadow cabinet position for peace and security. That's what our policies call for, and we want to model that within our party if that's what we're working towards in government. Carrie, you had your hand up.
Good day.
Yeah.
I'm on?
Yes, you are, sir.
Yes. Oh, thank you. So firstly, excuse me, Simone, I'm not as familiar with your history of the Green Party, so I mean no disrespect, but I just want to thank Paul for your extensive commitment to continuing to work with the Green Party, keep us going. I appreciate that. And I, sadly, in my mind, have become one of those people whose every answer to every problem is the thing that they're focused on. So there was a discussion of expertise and it being lived experience. Mine is partially disability, but that's not what I'm focusing on here. Your discussion of engaging with the members or levels of training, levels of education, whether that should be important or not. The part where I have this phrase that I always pop out, I'm the obsessively civic assembly person who always brings it up at parties now. But because of it deals with so much of what I see as aspects of what you're talking about. And I'll be honest, the policy development and its functions you're describing, I'm not familiar with at all, but the sub-actions within it, where you're trying to get, we call it a mini public, right? So it's a stratified demographic from a certain population, which in this case, I would see as being Green Party members as the population. And then within that, we want people who will be involved. But if we just ask people to be involved, then of course, anyways, as somebody said once, don't hold meetings that are just for people who go to meetings, right? Send out a notice that goes to all the members, and it says, we're discussing this, not knowledge cluster. And then from the responses, you as the organizer get to stratify the demographic and spread it out amongst a diversity of people to get this mini public of Green Party members, perhaps. So does that kind of sort of an idea template, does that fit with how this stuff works at all? Or does that contribute any way to the things you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're calling for is we have this process where people can apply and let us know that they're interested in certain policy areas, and then they would be invited to take part in policy tables with the shadow cabinet member that's responsible for that policy area. And that's what we're encouraging people to get involved but to focus, because we do get people that have identified 20 different areas in an application, and I think that what we're looking for is focus, right? What is
and I just want to, I guess the only difference between, I don't even know if it's a difference, but part of the premise of the mini public is that some of the people do not have professional or educated experiences, but they have an interest in contributing for reasons, maybe even the fact that they don't know, right? That might be an important factor for a certain policy. The fact that I don't know anything about foreign policy in Eastern Europe, perhaps, but my aunt and her family came from Eastern Europe, and so I have a reason to feel strongly and to contribute. And as I said, I'm way out of my league here, but I just wanted to add a few pieces in to help add suggestions.
All right. Well, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone? Ask me anything. Ask Simone anything. Anybody want to ask a question en français? Maria, I'm going to promote you to a panelist here as well. And please go ahead as soon as you pop in. There you go. You can unmute yourself and
hi. Good evening, everybody. I'm kind of trying to do too much multitasking here because I'm a policy fanatic and I'm trying to have the two computers at the same time on the other side with the motions. So sorry, I mostly got the questions that were asked, and I just want to offer a comment, okay, about this issue of the expertise versus people who have an interest. And I think that one of the ideas that we have with these tables or clusters or whatever the name ends up being is also a mechanism of support for people who want to develop policy, because you may have lots of ideas of an issue that you want to address and a passion for it. And sometimes it's necessary that you get some support from people who have the ability or the capacity to do the research, the analysis, to kind of help with the process to any member who wants to develop some policy. And this part of this philosophy comes from the way we designed the policy process for the Green Party of PI. That's exactly that, the idea of having some people who have this knowledge, we call them policy helpers, that know something, and then the membership that wants to put the policy together, it has some kind of support to do in a collective and participatory manner, and that fits perfectly with the concept of policy tables. Because I think that one of the most important things that, yeah, policy comes from the membership, but sometimes the membership can use some support from the party to build their policies.
Absolutely. That very well said, Maria. I agree with you wholeheartedly. That there are a lot of members who have ideas for policy, but they don't necessarily have a lot of the research that's available to other people. And so
the resources, exactly, yeah.
And being able to be like I was saying, like sitting at the foreign policy table with all of the people that are there, I'm learning, and it's great. You know, I want to see this working at the level right across the party with all of the shadow cabinet positions, so that we're really opening up the party to members and getting a really robust set of policies and making sure that we don't have the gaps that we do, because we have a lot of gaps in our policies, and we've had members of the foreign policy table that have identified a lot of gaps. They've identified a lot of policies that need to be revised and brought into this decade, this century, this year. So that's, you know, it's a process. It's a process that's very healthy, and I really look forward to working with members in this vein and seeing members like engaged right across the board on policy development like this. Are there any other questions? Other hands? We have a last few minutes here. If anybody wants to, Michelle, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, it's been really good hearing the different perspectives. And something I think it was Carrie mentioned would be nice to add to our, so right now we kind of have cabinet expertise within the party, expertise outside the party. It'd be nice to add a layer of almost like a mini citizens assembly within the party and it'll be a good check that is the language understandable to non-experts, and then the policy can only get better by all the different, so because I was kind of searching for a way to make it work, and to me that might be a good way. And then anyone that wants to get involved can be involved in that kind of citizens assembly kind of level. So it's been really helpful hearing all the different perspectives. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that, Michelle. I find it really valuable hearing from members with different perspectives as well, just on how we can be more inclusive and engaging with our members on the whole policy process side. And like Sarah was saying, members love their policy in this party, and it is sacrosanct. We want to make sure that we keep those policies in place, that we revise them where necessary, and that we have it accessible to voters. We want to make sure that we have a policy book that voters can see, and campaign workers, volunteers, and candidates. We want to make sure that it's accessible, because it makes the whole process of going into an election that much easier. We have platforms are designed as a specific view of what we want to do in the near term. You know, you put forward an election platform, and it highlights the top 10 or 15 items that you're going to work on in specific areas, and those all come from the policy book. But the platform can't speak to 80 pages of policy, so it needs to be more focused. But the policy book is there to guide shadow cabinet. It's there to guide the MPs and the leader. And like I said, it was Vision Green that really got me. Elizabeth May, obviously an awesome MP and leader, and a real mentor for me in the House of Commons, and somebody I've known for a long time. I had trouble saying no to her as many times as I did, but that and Vision Green really drove me to working in this party and being engaged in this party. And yes, of course, we want to, these policy briefs are something else that we need to continue to create, so that there are quick little bits and bytes that members and candidates can engage in. Any last words, Simone, before we pass over to Dr.
I think, je pense que c'était très constructif. On a entendu les points de vue des différents participants. Ça a permis de clarifier différentes choses, comme le mentionnait Michel. Je pense qu'il faut voir les tables comme des endroits de partage de connaissances, de construction, de politique, et ça nous permet de regarder tous les angles aussi. Hein. Donc, je pense que c'est très intéressant et je suis très enthousiaste pour les semaines, les mois, les années à venir là, et à travailler à cette table avec tous les gens là, qui veulent bien s'y joindre également. Là. Donc, moi, je vous encourage à postuler.
Okay. Any last questions or comments? We have 4 minutes. 4 minutes to go, folks. And then Dr. Jennifer Purdy, Shadow Cabinet Health Critic, will be up. Yes, Andy. Oh, did we just lose you? Go ahead, Andy. I saw your hand pop up. Nope.
I just wanted what we talked about the most was some of us was what was our motivation to be Green Party members. I'm very pragmatic. The best thing to do for the planet Earth is get rid of humans. So now what do I have to do to stay here?
Oh boy. Okay.
I'd like to answer that, Paul, but if you allow me, you're very pragmatic, Andy. I think we need to adapt for sure, and to really acknowledge that we're hosts here and to respect the planets, and we have to, we're all here, I think, to go into that direction and make all the population understand that also. And every day we need to take action in that direction, and find a balance, because right now we are exploiting the planet a way that it's not sustainable. But at the end, we're the ones who are putting our own life in jeopardy, as a group, as a society. It's like the Earth will survive us, but we will leave it a mess. And now, is that the direction we want to go? No, that's not what I want to leave to my son, to my grandsons. And no, I think it's time to move to, and that's why I joined the Green, because that's the party with the best principles and the best ideas, and to make things change, and really to get there, get more MPs, and do what we're going, do what we're saying, stop the fossil fuel, the exploitation, like stop giving subsidized, like not just spreading words like the liberals are doing, and now the NDP are with the, very close to the liberals, but really do it, and not just say some stuff. And I think we still have time to do it, and it's important to do it. And I still have faith in human being, Andy.
Yeah, it's a process of evolution. We need to evolve as a species, and that actually begins right here in our own minds. We have to rethink, the way that we live, and then move beyond thinking and actually into doing. And that's where we're, putting ideas to policies and policies to action. And I think that the Green Party and the members that I know are very driven that way. And I see, Green Party members around me that are engaged in their community, doing beautiful things, making sure that we feed people and take care of people who are less fortunate than ourselves, making sure that we speak out for peace and justice, social justice, and to ensure that we create the conditions for survival for the generations to come. The 7 generations principle that our president talks about, Lorraine Reckman, it's comes from Algonquin Ojibwe teaching, the 7 fires, that everything we do, we should be thinking those 7 generations ahead, and how our decisions today affect those future generations. And so much of what we're living is, consumer capitalist process where we're in competition, and we are actually cooperative human beings. We're cooperative by nature, and we have run the clock. It is now 4:30 my time. in BC. And I'd like to just turn over to Dr. Jennifer Purdy, and Dr. Purdy's here to talk about lifestyle medicine. Thank you, everybody.
All right, merci.
Merci, Simone.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'll see if I can just turn on and share my screen. Here we go. So yeah, I'm Jen Purdy. I'm a family doc, and I don't know if people can now, they can't see the application. So before I get started, I just want to say good evening to everyone. I'm speaking from Ottawa, from unceded territory of Algonquin and Anishinaabe. This is not a medical lecture, and I'm not offering medical advice. But if someone decides to change their way of eating to eat a bit more plant-based, if they're on blood pressure medications or medications that lower their blood sugar because of diabetes or something like that, well, because of diabetes, then they would probably have to check with their family doctor, because their the dosages of these medications will likely have to be lowered, because that's how effective lifestyle changes are. Regarding what we eat, this talk will not be advising people to go quote unquote vegan. There is no evidence that our health will be improved if we completely eliminate fat animal products. And when I was in the military, I actually met people in the military who do subsistence hunting and or even harvest roadkill, either so as to not waste resources, but also sometimes because they experience severe food insecurity. And finally, I firmly believe that to recommend veganism would be incredibly insensitive and inappropriate to First Nation, Inuit, and Métis. Also, looking at animal product consumption from a climate change lens, it is not hunting and fishing that contributes in any significant way to climate crisis. It is those of us, and I used to be one of them, who hunted at the grocery store or going through drive-thrus. It is animal agriculture that contributes to climate crisis, environmental degradation, and the loss of biodiversity. I will say it is useful for people to know that animal products, regardless of source, contribute to chronic disease and may well contribute to chronic pain, because knowledge is power, and this knowledge may enable people to make decisions to cut down in order to feel better and to be healthier. And other than this brief intro, I won't be discussing animal agriculture because there will be an excellent talk scheduled for tomorrow at noon. So I will carry on. In terms of conflicts of interest, I have none. And this is the outline. You don't need to read it all. That'll be just going over very quickly tonight, and then hopefully we'll have some questions. And sorry, I should have said, pour les francophones, si vous avez des questions pour la discussion, je ferai mon mieux à répondre aux questions françaises aussi. Okay? So lifestyle medicine. So lifestyle medicine is fairly new. I believe the American College of Lifestyle Medicine started in 2004. And Canadians, Canadians now have a little group within the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. I think we have maybe about 170 people, maybe. Doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, physiotherapists, psychologists, and other allied healthcare providers belonging to this interest group now, just because this is an excellent evidence-based way of helping people to improve their health. And I know I started off talking about what we eat because it is important, but it's not just about eating. As you can see, moving, if we're able to move, some people are not because of disability, but and also restorative sleep is so important, stress management, avoidance of risky substances, and that includes alcohol, unfortunately, and we'll talk about that, and positive social connection, especially as we've seen in the last 2 years. And all these pieces are actually evidence-based for helping us to improve our health, either prevent health issues, but also to help improve our health and sometimes reverse some chronic diseases and illnesses. So yeah, so basically a little bit more about nutrition. It's basically in line with the 2019 Canada Food Guide, which now recommends moving towards a more plant predominant way of eating. Fiber filled, most Canadians get about 16 grams of fiber. We should be getting far more fiber than we do. Sleep, if we don't get enough sleep, many people may not realize this, but even for Alzheimer's, when we sleep at night, tau bodies, which are found in the brains of people diagnosed with Alzheimer's, our brains actually, sleep is very important. And that's when tau bodies tend to get removed. And so I'm not saying sleep is the only solution for Alzheimer's or to help prevent Alzheimer's. All of lifestyle actually is important, but sleep, many people, sleep got a bit of a bad reputation, I guess, a few decades ago, and it was almost a bragging point to brag that we weren't getting enough sleep, but it actually is incredibly important for our immune system as well. We're more likely to catch things, no evidence for COVID, but evidence for viruses, other viruses. if we are sleep deprived. And like I said, it can also help us avoid some chronic illnesses and diseases. Exercise where possible, because not everybody can move, but where we are able to move more, that obviously there's a lot of evidence for physical activity for decreasing the risk of cardiovascular disease and cancers and other health issues. Substance use, that'd be like nicotine, tobacco, alcohol, and of course drugs. And that obviously, hopefully for everyone, it's fairly obvious that this can have significant health impacts for us. Stress management, something that we all might need a little bit more of in the last couple of years, but stress management can be incredibly helpful and helpful for us as well. And then finally, social connection. And this is actually a new pillar, but I think after 2 years of the pandemic, we can all agree that social connection, even for the introverts like myself, the pandemic really brought home the importance of social connectivity. So why is this important? Whether we're individuals or we're working in organizations, prevalence of chronic diseases among Canadian adults, and this is coming from the Public Health Agency of Canada, 44% of adults over the age of 20 have at least one of 10 common chronic conditions. These are the conditions listed below. So 1 in 4 adults will have hypertension, high blood pressure. Many of us kind of take it for granted as, oh, I've got blood pressure, now I need to take 1 pill or 2 pills or 3 pills. But by definition, actually, hypertension is actually a sign of heart disease, right? It's one of the first declarations a person will get that they have cardiovascular disease. But we've kind of normalized it, maybe because so many people have it, and a person takes a pill, and it's wonderful. Medication is excellent because it lowers that person's risk as compared to if they were to continue to do exactly what they were doing and not take a medication to lower their blood pressure. Blood pressure kills. It's one of the big killers around the world and in Canada every year. But hypertension is still nothing to take lightly. And even when we treat it, if we only treat with medication and we don't make changes to our lifestyle, then the underlying cause of the blood pressure will continue to cause issues and damage, even if the blood pressure numbers are looking good and we're treating to, say, 120/80 or whatever the target goal might be. The other thing here, too, on the left, because it's not all about diet, here's a little something from one of the Canadian, Government of Canada websites. 16.4% of adults met the physical activity target recommended in the Canadian 24-hour movement guidelines. So we're not moving enough. And you may have heard, and I'm driving a desk right now giving this presentation, but sitting down and being behind a desk, being sedentary is definitely a significant risk factor. It is not healthy for us. And many of us we're not physically active enough. Most of us aren't, according to this data. So how can lifestyle changes help? And we don't have to do everything perfectly. Like, it's just any tiny small step in the right direction is a tiny small step in the right direction, and it's excellent. So we don't have to hit all the pillars. It's the sort of thing where you do what you can, and sometimes people will be motivated to do more, of course, if they have something that's more serious, like, for example, congestive heart failure is incredibly serious. Then they might be motivated to make more significant changes in a few different areas of lifestyle, right? But in theory, in practice, Dr. Dean Ornish had looked at this. He's an American internal medicine specialist, and he actually was the medical advisor to 3 different presidents of the United States, Obama, Bush Jr., and Clinton, sorry. And anyways, what he has found is that the amount of changes we make to improve our lifestyle, if we move a little bit more, if we eat a few more fruits and vegetables, we will see a kind of corresponding increase to, or an improvement to, our health. So anyways, dietary changes, you can prevent, of course. Prevention is great, but many of us wait until we have problems before, at least I do sometimes, before you do anything about the health issue that we have developed. But dietary changes can, of course, prevent, treat, and then sometimes even reverse chronic diseases. Physical activity, it's a great form of stress management for people who are able to move. It improves their sleep. A sleep specialist has said at a couple conferences I've attended pre-pandemic, that what we do during the day sets us up for sleep at night. And physical activity is one of those things where, as long as it's not too close to our bedtime, then it can definitely help to sleep, to set us up for an improved sleep that night. Improved mental health, of course. If somebody is diagnosed with mild to moderate depression, physical activity is actually evidence-based for helping to improve that. And then, of course, we're decreasing our risk of chronic disease. Adequate sleep, like I said, they actually did a great little study with a virus that was not COVID, where they had people, two groups of people. One group was sleep deprived, one group was not, and they they took a Q-tip that had the swab was coated in like a cold virus, and put it up the nostrils of these research participants who were hopefully paid reasonably well. And the group that was sleep deprived was much more likely to catch the cold than the group that was getting adequate sleep. Of course, adequate sleep, it decreases our risk for accidents and decreases presenteeism. For anybody who doesn't know, presenteeism is where you still show up for work, but you're doing the minimal amount of work and really no one's really home because you're just too exhausted. And then, of course, it decreases our risk for chronic diseases, including Alzheimer's. It will help. It's one of the pieces for a decrease in the risk for Alzheimer's. Reducing the risky substance use, well, you save money. And by this is alcohol, nicotine, and other drugs. But we're also saving our health. Cancer, cardiovascular disease risk, etc. Everyone knows that smoking increases the risk of lung cancer. Less well known, it's starting to be more talked about now, but alcohol actually increases our risk of a variety of different cancers, including colon cancer and including breast cancer. And many women, and breast cancer affects men as well, but obviously it mostly affects women. Many women, including those who have been treated for breast cancer, do not realize this because it's not being talked about enough. And it's just good to know that even like two servings of wine, standard servings of wine a day, increases the risk, I believe it's 14 to 20%, which is really significant. Stress management reduces the risk of cardiovascular disease and cancer, and our eating habits are, of course, likely to improve for some of us. Some people like myself will tend to stress eat. And so if we manage our stress better, one of the improvements that we might see is that we're reaching for chips or French fries or chocolate less often. And of course, the relationships, that social connectivity piece, as we've all, many of us have witnessed and experienced firsthand during the pandemic, you have less of a sense of isolation, improved sense of well-being and connectivity, less absenteeism, and improved health. So, and this is helpful, and it's for anybody here who, if you own a small business or you have an organization, this is fantastic on an individual basis. It's actually fantastic for the Green Party of Canada as well. Like if we have, the more people we have who are feeling healthier and taking, managing their stress and maybe moving where possible, moving more, avoiding risky substances, then that allows us, there's a lot of benefits that come with lifestyle improvements. And you can see this here by the side. So for example, even higher productivity, if we're eating a bit smarter, sleeping better, managing stress and avoiding risky substances, accidents, this would be very key for people working in industrial environments, but also for driving to work, for example. So anyways, there's a lot of advantages to these lifestyle pieces. And I will say, one thing I should say, number one, some of these slides are courtesy of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. But the other thing too is, I don't know, many of us have probably grown up we're told fruits and vegetables are healthy. It's important to gain enough sleep. But even in medical school, it was not clarified why was it important? How do fruits and vegetables help to improve our health? What's so important about fiber? Why is it so important to sleep well? Why is exercise so important? How much? And if you don't know this, then you can't really talk with patients about that. And I learned, of course, over time. But I think one problem with Canadian society and elsewhere is we're not getting enough education about why these things are important and why social connection. Why is that so important? Intuitively, we know it is, but why and where are the advantages? And for example, social connectivity, there was a study for women who were, they were diagnosed with breast cancer. If they participated, and it would depend on the person, but if they participated in a support group for women diagnosed with breast cancer, they actually had a significantly increased risk of, increased rate of surviving the breast cancer. So social connectivity even is incredibly important. So if there's anybody listening in who already has a chronic disease, what I was taught in medical school, again, in 2004 to 2008, so it was a while ago, but there was a concept of primary prevention, secondary prevention, tertiary prevention. And primary prevention was vaccines, which are so important, especially as we found out in the last year, education about cigarettes, et cetera, et cetera. So you're preventing disease or injury before it even happens. Secondary prevention is when you have those regular exams, like a pap test for women, a mammogram for women, checking blood pressure for men and women, to detect the disease in the earliest stage. So the disease process is occurring, it has occurred, but you're catching it before it progresses too much, okay? And then tertiary prevention is when you, basically the goal is to quote unquote soften the impact of the illness or the injury that has lasting effects. So such as chronic disease management programs. And so an easy example for me, what I learned in medical school at the time was somebody with congestive heart failure. And that's when the heart is not beating, is beating very inefficiently. Then tertiary prevention in that case was you offer the person medications. And I mean, if they qualified for a heart transplant and they could get one, then you do a heart transplant. But otherwise, you were just treating with medication and trying to keep them alive and as comfortable for as long as possible. The good news is there's actually case reports now for lifestyle changes dramatically improving people with congestive heart failure, even improving how efficiently their heart pumps blood out, which is lovely. But anyways, back to this slide. This does not take into account the power of lifestyle changes. So what I learned didn't take into account just how powerful lifestyle changes are. Now they won't work for everything. For example, Lou Gehrig's disease, otherwise known as ALS, post-concussion syndrome, and Alzheimer's. Once it's advanced, there's absolutely no evidence that lifestyle changes will reverse any of those. But there's a myriad of so many other chronic health issues where lifestyle changes are incredibly powerful and can help to change things. And just to give an example, this is a picture from Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, this gentleman here. He's now, I think, 86 or 87, and Olympic gold medalist, general surgeon, served in Vietnam. And he did one of the first studies looking at dietary changes for people diagnosed with severe heart disease in the 80s. This was even before cholesterol lowering medications known as statins were available. And basically he took about 25 people who the cardiologist sent to him because he couldn't do anything else with them. So these people had already had stents or bypasses after a heart attack. And usually they, often, in some cases at least, they were told to make sure their wills were in order and their final requests were in place because there was nothing that could be done. And he started them on a diet that initially included dairy products, but when more evidence came out about dairy, he put them on a strictly plant-based diet. And just to say, the first person from that group, like some people dropped out, they became the control, part of the control group as a result. And the people who dropped out usually had either a heart attack or stroke or whatever, and things did not end so well. But for the people who stayed with a strict way of eating, the first person from, let's say it was a group of 18 or 19 who were able to stick from the 80s until this decade. And basically the first person died, I believe, in maybe 2014, 2015. She should have died when she was in her 60s. She died instead in her 90s. This picture, though, is one of his colleagues, Dr. Joe Crow, who is another surgeon. And as you can see, in 96, he had the distal LAD. This is known as the widowmaker. It's a left anterior descending coronary artery that feeds the heart with oxygen. And as you can see here, it's always nice to look at the bracket or the arrows. And in this case, you can see it's really moth-eaten. And so they did this. They did this angiogram, and they couldn't stent this. They couldn't bypass it. And this gentleman, he was upset because he clearly, the widowmaker artery makes widows because it kills people, and they couldn't stent or bypass it. But he just happened to talk to his colleague at work at the Cleveland Clinic, Dr. Esselstyn. Esselstyn told him about this way of eating and suggested it. And then a few years later, he was having chest discomfort. So the angiogram him again. Turned out it was stress, because look at this artery. It had actually reversed, okay? Now, does that always happen? No. but you can get increased flow. Even if you don't reverse the plaques, you can get the artery to relax because of the dietary changes. And of course, we're talking lifestyle. If you're stop smoking, cut down on drinking, if there's alcohol involved and that sort of thing, exercise once it's okay with the doctor and that sort of thing, and it's tolerated. But anyways, it's all about blood flow, right? And so this is a different person, 3 weeks of eating more of a plant-based diet, and somebody who, now red is flow. Red means good flow. So this person at the start did not have good flow in this coronary artery. 3 weeks later, not 3 months, not 3 years, 3 weeks later, look at how the flow has improved. And these numbers are American, but their cholesterol had also dropped like a stone, which is lovely. And another picture, insufficient flow. 3 weeks later, and this is another patient. It's like a happy face. We've got much better blood flow for this coronary artery. And again, your baseline cholesterol had dropped like a stone. Okay, so, and it's not just about heart disease or cardiovascular disease. Dietary changes can help with many, many different conditions. Like I said, the only ones, and when I write dementia, including Alzheimer's, as you can see on the slide right here, early onset, or especially, and apparently you can get the best results with not just dietary, but moving more, sleeping more, cutting down or stopping drinking, not smoking, stress management. You get much better improvement in somebody who is in their 60s and diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, which is known as the precursor to Alzheimer's. But yeah, the conditions I know where you do not see improvement with lifestyle changes is ALS, otherwise known as Lou Gehrig's disease. Usually it's always fatal. It's just a matter of when, unfortunately. And then post-concussion syndrome, there's no evidence for that. And then, and then of course, Alzheimer's, if it's advanced, significantly advanced, right now, there's no evidence, unfortunately, that can be reversed. But if somebody's diagnosed with it early and makes those lifestyle changes, then you can at least very much slow the progression so the person's able to continue to enjoy life. So I'd like to just throw in a quick word about back pain, because many people either have back pain or know people with back pain. Like I just said, it's all about blood flow. So the coronary artery is 4 millimeters in diameter, okay? Lumbar arteries, which feed the lower back pain is a prominent issue in Canada. They are only 2 to 3 millimeters. And for men, the penile artery, which is responsible for raising the flag or being able to get and sustain an erection, is 1 to 2 millimeters. So what do you think is going to get clogged up first, right? And so these are the normal arteries. Here, if we have decades of eating animal products, because it's only foods that are animal products that contain cholesterol, that'd be like your eggs, chicken, fish, meat, turkey, goat, dairy, fish, anything that comes from an animal is going to have cholesterol in it, right? But anyways, over time, these pipes start to get narrowed, right? So this person, it gets narrowed enough, they'll climb a flight of stairs or run across an intersection and feel like there's an elephant sitting on their chest, right? Because it's a coronary artery that's affected. For this person, I always think about cholesterol plaques. If I hear from a patient that they've got back pain and it came out of nowhere, and they don't, and it came on gradually, it came out of nowhere, there was no accident or anything like that. Or if they say, well, yes, I slipped on the ice, but it was 6 months ago and it's not getting better. Now I'm thinking cholesterol plaques, because like every part of the body, in order for healing to occur, we need to have oxygen and we need to have nutrients. And we can't get that delivered to the discs in the area if the arteries involved are all but completely blocked up. And then finally, the penile artery, of course, it gets blocked up. There will be a challenge getting and sustaining an erection. Good news is, of course, oftentimes these are reversible with dietary changes. And even if the plaque, like I said before, even if the plaque doesn't fully dissolve, the plaque will be stabilized, so thereby decreasing the risk, if we're talking coronary arteries, of having a heart attack. But also the artery itself will become more supple again, and that will allow more blood flow to occur. Finally, just for back pain, picture's worth 1,000 words. So this is a great study done in Finland, looking at patients who were known to have complained about back pain and patients who were not known to have complained about back pain. And this was an autopsy study. So people had died, and then they had a look at their lumbar arteries. So this, you can see these nice clean openings. It's always helpful to look at the arrows. And you've got these great openings to the lumbar arteries. And the sample would have come from a person not known to have complained about back pain. Now we go over here, and now you really need those arrows because you cannot see the openings well at all. And this one's basically obliterated. You can't see the opening at all. This sample would have come from somebody known to have complained about back pain. And of course, the blood flow would have been significantly decreased or none at all, simply because the cholesterol plaques had basically blocked up the arteries. And the problem with the lower back area is that that area does not do a good job of making new arteries if the original ones get blocked up. Okay, so I'll just go over quickly the different pillars. So diet, like I said, the more plant-based, the better. There's no evidence that a person has to be 100%. And I like to emphasize that for everybody, just because it's so important to stay evidence-based and not make this an all or nothing thing. My recommendations will be a little bit more strict if somebody has very severe heart disease or kidney failure. But for everybody else, and even then there's no evidence for 100%, but if I had somebody with severe cardiovascular disease or who is, teetering towards dialysis, then my recommendation would be to make it as much plant-based as possible. And you want it to be less processed as well, because you can be I'm sure many people have seen people who are plant-based or also known as vegan who can be very unhealthy. And I can be too. I can eat highly processed, quote unquote, vegan or plant-based foods, and they won't be incredibly healthy either. Like Beyond Burger is tasty, but it has 2 different types of oil. It's highly processed. Much better to have like beans and rice. So what to eat? Recommendations are whole grains. So that'd be like rice, quinoa, couscous, oats, whole grain bread, whole grain pasta, legumes, which are beans, lentils, chickpeas, tofu, soy products. And just a word about soy products, they're actually incredibly healthy for men and women. And for women, they are known to actually help prevent breast cancer. And they're actually protective. Soy products are very protective, and they're good for both men and women. Vegetables, fruit, nuts and seeds, herbs and spices, and a small amount of preferably monounsaturated oil. So that'd be such as olive oil. There's actually a brand new study that came out a few months ago suggesting where the findings were suggestive that a small amount of olive oil could be protective against cancer. So good to know. And nuts and seeds and oils, if somebody is trying to, maintain their weight or possibly lose a bit of weight, nuts, seeds, and oils are healthy for us, but they're incredibly calorie dense, number one. So it's very easy to eat too many. And then also for somebody with severe cardiovascular disease, or kidney disease as well, I'd be cautious about oils. Moving more. So this again is just some people are unable to move more either because of disability or chronic pain. Sometimes also might just be their life situation. If they don't have, some people truly don't have time if they're trying to, because we don't have a guaranteed livable income, work 2 jobs and parent, or to be doing other activities, taking care of other family members. But for people who can move more, the answer is people will often ask me, what should I do for exercise? Do what you love, because otherwise it can be hard to do it. I always like to mention the 5-minute rule. 5-minute rule is if a person's having a hard time getting into exercise, just tell yourself you'll walk or you'll dance for 5 minutes, and if you hate it, you stop. And I tell them to honor their commitment to themselves. And so if that's not a good day for them, then after 5 minutes, if they truly don't feel like it, they can stop. But now they've got 5 minutes of exercise under their belt. The recommendation is a minimum 150 minutes, which sounds like a lot for moderate intensity, but that works out to being 30 minutes a day for 5 days a week, right? You can also do 90 minutes of high intensity, that'd be running. And then of course, you also want some resistance or weight training. That can be lifting groceries or kids, stretching, and activities that challenge balance. One caveat, one cannot outrun a poor diet. So that's why you can hear every now and then of a marathon runner who has a heart attack, because they might be able to run so that they're thin on the outside and look fit on the outside, but that will tell you nothing about what their arteries look like, right? Or they may develop inflammatory bowel disease instead. So we cannot outrun a poor diet, unfortunately. And Canadian recommendations for more information, the CSEP-guidelines.ca. Adequate sleep. If you don't get 8 hours, don't worry about it. Some people will get 7 hours and worry because 8 hours became popularly known in society as what was recommended. It's actually 7 to 8 hours. And there's actually a few people out there who get by on 4 hours. And sorry, I should not say get by. You put them in a sleep lab, they get all the sleep they need in 4 hours. They cannot sleep more than that. It does them no good whatsoever. So it's just good to know that 7 to 8 hours. And to me, I'm always asking if people are feeling well rested in the morning, right? Because that's the key, because some people might be used to 6 hours and wake up and feel fine, right? So even the 7 to 8 is not a hardcore rule for everyone. The big thing for me is, do they feel well rested in the morning? And if they don't, then hopefully family physicians, walk-in clinics, sleep specialists may be able to help. The sleep labs in Canada are normally covered by our respective provincial healthcare plans, and they can help to identify sleep issues such as obstructive sleep apnea, which can really put somebody at significant risk for health issues and accidents, of course, because they're falling asleep at the wheel sometimes if it's bad enough. If somebody has a hard time sleeping, and this is a very quick talk, but an excellent resource if they're having a hard time sleeping, this is available from many local libraries, is Say Goodnight to Insomnia by psychologist Dr. Greg Jacobs. Substance use. So if possible, quit. And there might be a couple of people listening and saying, oh, that's lovely. I've tried several times. So if not, consider harm reduction as a strategy. And hopefully, especially being the Green Party, many of us might know what harm reduction is, but just in case, harm reduction is where basically we want to keep the person as healthy as possible. And so sometimes people are unable to quit, whether it's smoking or drinking or using drugs. And so therefore, you want to be able to encourage them to be able to cut down in a safe way, but understanding they may not get to zero, and that's perfectly okay, because just by reducing the amount of the drug, whether it's alcohol, nicotine, or other drugs, just by reducing the amount. And of course, if we're talking drugs that are illegal right now, then we should be talking safe supply, which is a policy issue, which the Greens are all over, which is lovely. But harm reduction is an excellent strategy to be considered. I just like to go over medications and other treatments quickly, because sometimes people don't know about this. Nicotine or smoking cigarettes or cigars, I suppose. Champix is the medication, nicotine replacement therapy. That's the patch, the gum, the inhaler, lozenges that have nicotine in them. You can use those and still be smoking. So that'd be an example of a harm reduction strategy where people they're smoking 2 packs a day and they put a couple full-size patches on and they use the inhaler. They might still go and have a couple cigarettes, but they might cut it down to half a pack. That's a harm reduction strategy that has just significantly decreased their risk, right? And then Zyban, of course, is another prescribed medication that can help to help somebody quit smoking. Alcohol, AA, and there's other support programs out there. There's apps to help people track their alcohol so they start to have an appreciation as to how much they're drinking. Because I do a lot of work with people with alcohol use disorder, and some people know exactly what they're drinking and some people don't. And of course, it varies for some, but it's like clockwork for others. Naltrexone, this is a very important medication to know about for alcohol. And the Sinclair method helps for reduction or abstinence, right? Because some of the things that are better known for alcohol are basically cutting down to zero. Many people out there, and definitely most of my patients, they've tried cutting to zero and they've done AA, which also preaches abstinence, and they have not been able to do it. So it's important to know that there's medications out there for reduction or for abstinence. So it's no longer a problem, and we're reducing the health risk as well. Acamprosate is another medication, although the goal there is abstinence, so it's good to know. And then there's a couple of other medications that can be used as second line. One thing I like is the BCCSU, that's British Columbia Center for Substance Use, and they have guidelines, which I assume most of the provinces, including Ontario, uses, because I don't believe we have our own. I'm here in Ontario, but they don't list antabuse or disulfiram. Antabuse is a medication that I have a bias against. It's kind of cruel, where a person would take antabuse on a regular basis, and then if they decide to have a drink, they become violently ill. And there's been even case reports of people dying because they were taking antabuse and then they drank alcohol and they were so sick they died. So antabuse, you would never treat somebody with blood pressure or with diabetes with a medication that would make them violently ill for no good reason. So philosophically, I'm opposed to antabuse. And so I'm quite happy to see it's not in the BCCSU guidelines for helping people with alcohol use disorder. And then of course, opioid use disorder, there's the medications available for that, buprenorphine / naloxone and methadone. But of course, especially because this is a Green Party talk, the whole idea of decriminalization, which is currently green, it was in our platform anyways for the 2021 and 2019 election, looking at decriminalization and safe supply. These things are so important because this is a health issue, not a criminal issue. So stress management can be anything that's safe that works for the patient. So, you know, for many patients and people, it will be prayer, it can be meditation, mindfulness, yoga, working out, hanging out with a companion animal, hanging out with family, journaling, et cetera, et cetera. I just want to emphasize that if somebody has depression or anxiety, stress management techniques by themselves will help, but they will not treat depression or anxiety. Depression treatment is still necessary and helpful for both depression and anxiety if there's a diagnosis. And then social connection. It's a challenge, if not impossible, for many people over the last 2 years, and is, like I said before, vitally important even for us introverts. So ideas, especially now as things are opening up, visiting people, and sometimes if you're at home and if there's other people with you and you're not tired of them, putting down the smartphone or the tablet and just being engaged and being connected is so important. Zoom calls if possible, if there's people you cannot visit for whatever reason, and connecting with colleagues, people at the grocery store. And finally, as things start to open up, if volunteering is a possibility, it's always nice. So quick word, because this will of course be discussed tomorrow about animal agriculture, but moving towards more of a plant-based way of eating, of course, we save a lot, so much in terms of resources, because if we're talking about agricultural production, of course, it takes a lot of water to produce burgers, basically. And then just looking at the impact that food has, a significant impact from a climate change perspective. But I don't want to get into this too much, simply because I know there'll be a discussion tomorrow at noon, which will be fantastic. So, and then carbon emissions from food. So again, lentils at 6 kilometers versus beef at 176 kilometers. So the footprint is so much more significant with animal agriculture. Yeah, and that's about it for my presentation. Yeah, it's just, care about animals. It's also important and I must, again, talking about large scale animal agriculture, because it's a little bit cruel too, is just to be a little bit more, eating more plant-based will help our individual health, but also our population health, planetary health, and then recommended resources. And that is it. I'll take questions now if we have any. And let's see. Okay, so I am just going to see if I can pull up the chat, see if there's any questions at all to answer. Oh.
Jen, I'll get started if there aren't any others.
Okay, so sorry, there's no questions?
I'll get started if people needed a minute to think about things.
Oh yeah, so sorry. I'm sorry about that. I'm just trying to find which channel I'm supposed to be on. So yeah, please carry on.
Well, actually, Ella and I were discussing this in the Rocket Chat while you were talking.
Oh yes.
Could you comment a little bit about intermittent fasting and like any benefits or any pros and cons, basically? What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, so it can definitely, excellent question. Boy, so it can definitely be beneficial because for example, and I think another term is like time limited eating. I may not be getting that completely correct, because intermittent fasting can sometimes just be like not eating for a few hours and then eating dinner. But time restricted eating, that is TRE, time restricted eating, can be helpful, because for many people like myself, it's after dinner that we don't always, like if we're eating after 8 o'clock, it's not usually fruits and vegetables. It's usually, in my case, chips or chocolate or whatever the case might be. It may not be the healthiest choices. And so time restricted eating can help from that perspective. Number one, for people who find, especially for people who find that they, have a bit of a small a addiction with food, then that can be helpful. There's also Walter Longo. He's a scientist in the States who's been looking at the benefit of having intermittent fasting, AKA time restricted eating, and using that as a tool with people before they go into chemotherapy, because what he is finding is that if there's a significant amount of time restricted eating, people are able to actually become much more receptive to chemotherapy when they start chemotherapy, in that somehow it has a protective effect on our healthy cells, while exposing the cancer cells, they don't get that protective effect. And so there may be success. I don't think the science is conclusive yet, but it can definitely, and for the rest of us, like I said, it can definitely be helpful to a point, especially if we find we're having a hard time, eating after hours. Sometimes when I hear that somebody is eating, they don't eat until 12 though, like if they don't eat too much early on in the day, then my concern is they get too hungry, because then, I don't know about anybody else, if they get too hungry, I want to gnaw somebody's arm off. So when somebody says that they're not eating in the morning because they're trying to do time restricted eating, intermittent fasting, and they say they want to start at 2 or 4, 5 p.m., that 5 p.m. meal may not be the healthiest, and they may eat a heck of a lot. The other thing too is, this is an aside, there was a great study where they gave people exactly the same meal, 7 a.m., 7 p.m. And people at 7 p.m., they absorb every calorie much more efficiently than they do at 7 a.m., which is great if you're trying to put on weight, not so much if you're trying to, for people who may want to lose weight. So I just say that there's a great saying, like eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and dinner like a pauper. So some evidence for time restricted eating for sure, and it can be helpful. Sorry.
No, that's great. But so what would the ratio be, do you think? Like,
there are different ratios out there, and I don't know if I can really recommend one. I think for me, let's say somebody has a 9-to-5 job or whatever, unless if they're averse to breakfast, I don't tell them that you got to have breakfast. I'd say, but when you start to feel hungry, hopefully you have a chance. I'm thinking teachers right now who can't always, excuse themselves to have a meal because of their other responsibilities. But the idea to me is when you feel like eating in the morning or late morning, that you should be able to eat. And then for time restricted eating, to me, it'd be probably anytime up to 7 or 8, depending when the person gets home, has a chance to have dinner. Just because, again, we don't always make the best choices. You may also find you sleep better at night because you're still digesting, but it's kind of going that, you've already started the digestive process if you're not eating, say, at 9 or 10 o'clock at night. So. Sorry, Ella?
Hi, yes. Yeah, I have a couple questions. One was, this has been a very interesting discussion. Thank you, Dr. Purdy. One question was about low protein diet for longevity. What do you think about that? And especially if it's mostly or all plant-based low protein?
Oh, sorry. Okay, so pardon me. The first part of the question was something about longevity, but for some reason I didn't hear it all. And I'm so sorry. I'm on the right channel.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so I've heard that a low protein diet can add a lot of longevity to your life, especially if it's mostly or all plant-based.
Okay, good question. And I don't know, I'll be honest, I don't know, I haven't heard that, but I haven't been really looking into it. Where I know that a low protein diet will be very effective is in people with kidney disease. So even to the point that even if somebody's on, like if we're trying to keep somebody like from being able to avoid dialysis, not only there, my recommendation will be a little bit more strict, but still a recommendation. The person can do what they want in terms of being more whole food plant-based if possible. But even within there, basically, apparently it's even better for them to even there not be looking for protein-rich plant-based foods like your pulses, just because kidneys, like too much protein is hard on the kidneys. And if they're quite damaged, as you are with somebody with chronic kidney failure or chronic kidney disease, then even too much plant protein is not helpful either. But in terms of low protein diet for longevity, I suppose it's, or a low or normal protein diet, because most Canadians are getting way too much. And even people who are 100% plant-based have to really work hard. Maybe Oreos and Coca-Cola diet would got to get you a diet where you wouldn't get enough protein every day. Everybody else, though, everyone's got gained enough protein. That's not the issue at all. But I can see it maybe being a longevity diet just because you're not getting too much protein, and too much protein, especially from animal sources, is definitely being linked and is positive as being why we've got significantly increasing rates of chronic kidney disease in our society. Oh, sorry, I think you're muted, but.
Thank you so much. I have a lot more questions, but I'm going to let other people have their chance.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. So, okay, so let me just, give me 1 second because I'm not too sure which channel I'm supposed to be on. And so I'm looking around to see if there's any other questions. No, ask anything maybe? Anyways, no. Fundraiser, GreenTalks. Oh, lifestyle medics. I'm so sorry. I'm apparently a technological Luddite. So, oh yes, okay. So yeah, okay. What lumbar arteries look like? Yes. Yeah, so yeah, Beyond Burgers, I'm definitely a fan. And for anybody, you think they're definitely healthier than beef burgers, right? You're not going to get the cholesterol, you're not going to get the arachidonic acid. Arachidonic acid, our bodies, we all make arachidonic acid. We absorb it whether we need it or not from all animal products, including dairy. So Beyond Burgers will not have arachidonic acid. The beef burger will, or the turkey burger, or the chicken burger. And then we also, hydrocyclic amines are produced whenever you expose meat to high heat. So you won't get that with Beyond Burgers. So Beyond Burgers are healthier. And full disclosure, I just had a Beyond Burger for dinner. So, but I am just saying that they're not the healthiest option. If you make a bean burger at home, that would be healthier. Let's see. Yeah, Dr. Yeah, I've heard that Dr. Brian Lynn is at the Royal Ottawa. Apparently, he based his class for people with insomnia off of Say Goodnight to Insomnia. Let's see, intermittent fasting. And I'm so sorry, I'm just looking to see if there's any other questions or comments. All right, I'm just going to go back up. I think that's about it. Oh, yes. Plant-based diet for prevention of zoonotic diseases. That's an excellent point. And Ella, you might be addressing this tomorrow as well. Definitely. Just because, for example, zoonotic diseases, those are like, if we're talking like swine flu, avian flu, COVID-19. And there's an excellent book by nutritionfacts.org author whose name, Dr. Michael, his name will come to me in a second. But anyways, How to Survive a Pandemic. And basically the book goes into, before I read this, I did not know much about pandemics and the history of pandemics. But basically pandemics and most of our modern contagious diseases, whether we're talking the flu or COVID, mumps, measles, they all come from animal husbandry, okay? Full stop. And that's one of the reasons why when colonization occurred, smallpox came to North America. Indigenous did not practice animal husbandry in the same way. So there were no contagious diseases, which is why, unfortunately, Indigenous suffered significantly. And there were no diseases that went from Indigenous to impact the colonizers, which to me is a negative. But anyways, yeah, so the plant-based way of eating, the more plant-based we can eat, and again, I'm not addressing people who are Indigenous or people who are, different group who are subsistence hunting and that sort of thing. But for the rest of us who hunt at Sobeys or Food Basics or whatever, the fewer animal products we can consume, the better, because like avian flu. There was, I don't know if there's been calls recently, but back in the early 2000s, they had to call tens of thousands, if not more, I believe, chickens because of an avian flu outbreak. Avian flu outbreaks are occurring around the world, and that's that's another possible next epidemic for all of us. Same thing with swine flu. There's been an outbreak somewhere in the States every year since the 1960s. Now, that doesn't mean that becomes a pandemic. Obviously, that has not occurred, but the risk is significant with animal agriculture, as we'll probably hear more about. So yes. And then the question, the new mayor of New York, Eric Adams, reverses diabetes with plant-based diet. What are my thoughts? Fantastic, because he can now be a role model, and he's now, I believe, instituting at least one meal in schools, in the New York schools per week, that will be plant-based. So when he won, I don't know, I didn't really even look at his politics, but it's wonderful. The more people we can see in key roles who are eating more of a plant predominant or plant-based diet, and in his case, he's a great spokesperson because he had terrible untreated type 2 diabetes. It finally affected his sight. He was visually impaired, and then it found out that he had grossly out of control type 2 diabetes, and he was able to treat it and reverse it by adopting a plant-based diet, a plant-based way of eating. And so as a doc, I want people to have to see doctors because, to prevent health issues, but I want them to be so healthy they really don't have to see doctors much. And that's where the power of lifestyle medicine really has significant value. So I think that might be it for questions. I don't want to go over time because it's Saturday night. I'm sure people have better things to do. Ella, I don't see any other questions. Do you see anything else for me to do?
Nirav just added the comment that I don't know if you want to say that yourself, Nirav, or I can just read it. I've generally been eating breakfast and then again around 6 or 5.
Nirav also put some questions in the Zoom chat.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay, so let's see. I'm just going to go back up because I saw something. Oh, wait, down. I see questions are wanted. Blue zones accepted as a positive idea. Oh yeah, completely. Blue zones are fantastic. We don't have a blue zone in Canada, and that kind of, it's not a surprise. The nearest blue zone for us is Loma Linda, California. Why? Because Loma Linda, California has a huge population of Seventh-day Adventists. And Seventh-day Adventists are a people who follow this religion where they basically are very careful about what they eat. They're careful where possible to be moving, to be physically active, and they're socially engaged in their community. And as a result, they are incredibly healthy, and they tend to live to, not the majority, but a significant number are living in good health and through their 90s and 100s. And that's the definition of a blue zone. And there is, I think, 6 or 7 blue zones around the world. There's one in Italy, there's one Okinawa, Japan, and there's a few others here and there. I can't remember where. But yeah, blue zones are, they're fantastic, and they're definitely a positive idea. And again, it comes down to lifestyle, the sleeping, physical, social connectivity with other people, stress management, moving more where possible, and eating a plant predominant way of eating is where the evidence is at, and what you see with the blue zones as well. Any recommendations to help those who live in food deserts to eat healthier foods? Oh, that's a good question, because I know even here in Ottawa, there's Dunrobin, there's a bit of a food desert in one area of Dunrobin. Oh, to me, the way, if they live in a food desert, it's going to be hard. There's no bones about it. What will be easier if, you can get a bag of rice, you can get even a dried dried pulses, whether it's beans, lentils, or chickpeas, or canned, and there's places you can buy them inexpensively. But if you had a food desert, to me, the idea would be maybe just having your staples. And then if you had the fridge space, because this has been an issue sometimes for some of my patients, but like fruit and vegetables, what I will say for Canada is sometimes we get wrapped around the axle about, is it fresh? Well, if it's seasonal, wonderful. But if it's wintertime, those frozen berries will be just as nutritious. They may actually be more nutritious than the berries that were shipped from Chile, thousands of kilometers away or whatever. But food deserts will be difficult, and that will be an issue definitely in some parts of Canada. And I don't know that there's an easy solution other than canned or frozen vegetables or fruit where possible. And then the other staples being things like oats for oatmeal, rice, quinoa, couscous, which are dried, and also usually less expensive. If you look per kilogram or per protein or per calorie, these plant-based foods are usually much less expensive than animal products. But yeah, food deserts are a significant issue, and that's all I have about that. I'm sorry, I don't know if I have any more solutions other than looking at other policy issues like guaranteed livable income and that sort of thing to make these things more affordable. And then you could also have communities having better transportation systems so that people would be able to get out of the food desert, acquire the food they need, because there's also about transportation when there's a food desert too. That's it for me, I think. Is there any other questions?
Yes, there's one more from Dennis. Can you see Dennis's question?
Let's see, on the Zoom or on the chat?
I think it's in Zoom. I'll just read it. It's the impact of guaranteed livable income. Do you see that one?
No, I haven't seen that.
Thank you, Dr. Purdy, for your presentation. Has there been much discussion within the lifestyle medicine community on the impact of guaranteed livable income on population health? Income is a fundamental social determinant of health.
Yeah, and for lifestyle, actually, no. And part of the reason probably is because the conferences like the States, it's so not on their radar, I don't think at all, that it hasn't, guaranteed livable income has not come up that much, I don't think, except for maybe was it Mr. Anthony Yang in the Democratic runoff a couple of years ago may have mentioned that. And with the Canadian interest group, we're going to start getting going. So we've been more talking about, billing and how to practice lifestyle medicine in Canada, because it's not easy at all. So the guaranteed livable income, I threw that in there just because I'm a real fan, obviously, and because just health is so much more. Like, I'm the health critic, but it's obviously health is basically every portfolio in government, and that includes, of course, people's income. Guaranteed livable income is where the evidence is at. So, but no, it's not a big discussion piece in lifestyle medicine. But if ever it comes up, or if I need to push it in there, whenever we're having lifestyle medicine discussions with a Canadian group, at least members interest group, of course, I'll be one to bring it up because it's evidence-based, and it only makes sense. And we all know we have patients sometimes where this may not be achievable. It's not usually because the food's more expensive. Again, if they're buying animal products, eating plant-based is usually, for most people, it's going to be less expensive. The only thing I can't speak for people northern, because they have a northern food program up there, which was just redone, but it's not perfect. And they're in other parts of the country where there's food deserts, as Nirav brought up, that's where you're going to have an issue. And GLI, actually, even then, like I said, it's going to have to be more than just GLI. You need community sports, transportation, and that sort of thing. Yeah. So, is that it now, I think, for questions?
I think so. I think people are just starting to think about it and have questions at the end, but it seems like that's it.
Well, what I'll do is I'll just put, I don't know if I can message to everyone. Oh, here I can message to everyone. If ever somebody had a question afterwards, I'm just putting my email, my Green Party email in the chat, jennifer.purdy@greenparty.ca, in case there was an interest. But on that note, I think I'm done. Thank you so much for having me. And a big thank you, Bella, for just running, helping with the questions and everything, because clearly I'm a bit of more of a technological Luddite than I thought I was. So thank you so much for your help. And thank you for having me, Allison.
It's been a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much, Dr. Purdy, Jennifer. So just a reminder to everybody, Rocket Chat's not closed. So the conversation can absolutely continue on. And some of the panels yesterday, they're still talking about it today. So please just keep talking if you'd like to. If you think of other questions later on, please feel free to participate in Rocket Chat. And that is actually it for our Green Talks this evening. Thank you so much for everybody who was in attendance. And of course, you can always watch this again, because I definitely want to. There was so much information. You can definitely watch this again on YouTube. We'll put the YouTube link into Rocket Chat as well, so you'll have that. And we are beginning once again tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific with the talk on AI. And that will be over at 11:30 in time for morning opening on the plenary side. So I hope to see you first thing in the morning, bright and early for the West Coast, not quite so bright and early for the East Coast, but maybe for a Sunday, people might consider that bright and early. But I'm going to end off right now because it is actually Earth Hour. So we should just shut everything down for the hour as good Greens do. So everybody have a good night, and hopefully I'll see you tomorrow morning. Take care.